This Stasis Warlock is the perfect crowd control build. We will have the ability to throw stasis turn grenades and infinite cold snap grenades once you chain them correct. We're going to be gaining a huge boost to our damage resistance and be able to tank a lot of damage in this build, as well as control all the ads. And we're going to be combining this with one of the best exotics of this season, Polaris Lance, as well as a blinding grenade launcher. So we are going to have the perfect crowd control build. We're going to be able to take on any difficult content, whether that be Grandmaster Nightfalls, dungeons, raids, or even the legendary gambit. So if you're struggling to complete content because of your lack of crowd control and you need the perfect build to be able to blind, freeze, and stun all the ads, this is the build for you. Let's jump right into it. To kick things off, there are going to be 3 things for this build that are mandatory. Number 1 is going to be the first exotic of this build, which will be osmiomancy gloves. With osmiomancy gloves, we're going to gain a second cold snap grenade on our Stasis Warlock. And if I forgot to mention, this will be on our Warlock and we will be playing on Stasis. But with the osmiomancy gloves, we're going to get a second cold snap grenade, and our cold snap grenades have an additional charge that recharges quicker on direct impact. And they spawn a seeker, and the seeker spawned from the cold snap grenade travels further. So all that means is if you throw down your cold snap grenades in a large group of enemies, it's going to chain together and almost 90% of the time refund your entire cold snap grenade, and you have 2 chances to do so. So there's going to be 2 playstyles and 2 different things you want to keep in mind when playing with the osmiomancy gloves. You can either chain your grenade and freeze all the enemies in front of you, or you can throw your grenade down as a stasis turret and freeze enemies that haven't even spawned yet or that will spawn. That's the first thing we need for this build that's mandatory. The second thing we need for this build that's mandatory, which is one of the best exotics of this season just because of all the seasonal artifact perks that combine well with this exotic, is going to be Polaris Lance. Polaris Lance needs no explanation in itself, but the key thing about Polaris Lance that makes it so good is that it does scorch targets. And once you pick this up with the 4 seasonal artifact mods that grant solar guns huge benefits, you're going to be pumping out lots of damage. So once you do freeze, blind, or stun those enemies, you're going to be able to pump out lots of damage with your Polaris Lance. The last thing we do need for this build will be a blinding grenade launcher in our kinetic slot. So the blinding grenade launcher we do have for the build is Pardon Our Dust, which you can get from Beards of Eternity. And the reason we're using a blinding grenade launcher is so that just in case we don't have a cold snap grenade and we're not able to throw it on our turret, then we have an additional way to control all those ads. And blinding enemies has always been one of my favorite things to do, especially when taking on Grandmaster or even Dungeon, just because of how many ads spawn at a time and sometimes you just can't keep up. So a blinding grenade launcher combined with our stasis build should make all the ads seemingly become tamed, and you can actually complete the content and do the mechanics as necessary. Now, once you have those 3 things, the last thing we want to set up is going to be our stasis subclass. In all our stasis subclass, the things we really want to be focusing on is just making sure that our stasis abilities slow targets for a longer duration and that we're just boosting our stats to the maximum. Those are the only things we're focusing on. So for our stasis subclass, we do have the cold snap grenade, and the aspects we are using will be Bleak Watcher, so we do have the ability to make a stasis turret just in case you don't want to waste your cold snap grenades because the enemies are so far, or if you want to lock down a certain area on the map, you do have the ability to do so because you have a stasis turret. The next thing we have is Ice Flare Bolt. So now once you shatter a frozen target, it's going to spawn seekers that track and freeze other nearby targets. This comes highly recommended because every single time you shatter a frozen target, whether that be a champion or a mini boss, it's going to spawn those seekers and track to all the surrounding ads. That's why we need it. Now for the fragments, you can always swap these in and out. The only fragment that we do want to keep in mind that enhances the build will be Whisper of Durance. And Whisper of Durance is going to make sure that our slows last for a longer duration. That means once we freeze a target, they're going to be frozen for a longer duration. We want to have the best crowd control build, so we need those enemies to just stay locked in place for as long as possible. The next thing we do have is Whisper of Change. So once we're near a frozen target, aka any champion that we do freeze, we're going to take reduced damage from that targets or from targets in general. So that's going to boost our damage reduction again just by being near a frozen target. The next thing we have is Whisper of Torment. So we gain grenade energy each time we take damage from targets. So not only are you having a huge damage reduction from frozen targets, but when enemies or regular enemies start shooting at you and dealing damage, you're going to gain grenade energy every single time. The last thing we do have is Whisper of Shards. So once we shatter a stasis crystal, it's going to boost our grenade recharge. So Whisper of Shards combined with Whisper of Torment is how we're going to be chaining our grenade if we are not spamming it correctly, or if we're just using it to lock down certain areas and throwing Bleak Watchers, and we're not able to refund our grenade immediately. That's how we're going to be refunding our grenade if we're not spamming it with the cold snap grenades and we need turns to lock down certain areas. As for the stats, we want as much damage reduction as possible, so that means we want 100 resilience to gain a 30% damage reduction and 100 discipline so we can drop down the base cooldown of our cold snap grenade. If you are able to get both of those stats to 100s and you have extra stats left over, then the next stat you should be focusing on is your recovery, so we're able to spam our rift and heal our team. As far as the mods I'm using, the only mods that are important that I've swapped around for this build will be Solar Siphon on my helmet to spawn those elemental orbs once I defeat targets with my Polaris lance, and two Solar Surge mods on my leg. Those are the most key important mods, as well as Time Dilation on my Warlock bond. As for the rest of the mods, Solar Loader and Solar Dexterity on my gauntlets, the regular damage resist mods, my solar damage resistance, my harmonic resistance, and a concussion dampener for my chest piece. For my feet, I already said we're using solar weapon surge, and for my warlock mod, we're using powerful attraction combined with time dilation. And that is it for my mods. If you guys want to copy all the mods I'm using, there will be a dim link in the description, as well as a pinned comment with the dim link. I hope you guys like the build and try it out in Grandmasters or even the legendary Gambit itself. If you guys enjoyed the video, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next